Anyway, thanks for joining me today. It's been a while since I've last spoken to you, Justin. So yeah, good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you as well, and it's a pleasure catching up. I think last time we saw each other in person was when I came over to Australia. And
Yes,
you were
that's
involved
right.
in
Yes,
in
for that conference. But yeah, that's
yes,
like nearly 5 years ago now. Hey, time flies.
feels like ancient history now, doesn't it?
Yes. Plus, I believe that both of us are no longer interested in the Bitcoin Cash uh, cryptocurrency as well. So that's a big
That's right.
change that has happened over the last few years. But
Yeah, I wasn't really updated on your position on this. I haven't been following that
well,
whole thing. Why did you leave?
I'll tell you now. Basically, I kind of felt a bit disillusioned with the way things were going in terms of price. I think this was also a big issue with because I was doing a lot of merchant adoption stuff, and on that end, the price just forever collapsing was not in any way helping what we were trying to achieve in that area. Because you get a bunch of merchants on and then they lose money, and it was not good unless they were employing some kind of strategy where they were instantly converting that money into instantly converting the Bitcoin Cash into the local fiat currency. That would be the only way to escape that. But
Yeah,
I think maybe just the benefits that peer-to-peer electronic cash could have potentially provided them were being heavily outweighed by certain factors such as what I just mentioned.
yeah,
But also, the other thing I didn't like was I just felt like over the years the leadership was just very incompetent, and we weren't seeing any changes in that area. Like it was just continuously going in the wrong direction. Tried to stay along with it as long as I could, but the time comes when you got to say like enough is enough, and you move on. I think so. That's where I'm coming from on that.
nice. Yeah, that's what struck me the most was really a failure of leadership. Um, that's what I found to be happening. And then I started to think about it also as like systemic.
Yeah.
So like why were we so dependent upon leadership? In the case of all of the forks really of Bitcoin, right?
Well,
Why?
in my opinion, it goes
Yeah.
all the way back to like before the chain split occurred, and it was uh, going back to BU and a lot of the stuff ups that they did back then. If that didn't happen, I think right now things could be a whole lot different. There might not be
What did you
two
think
versions of Bitcoin. There
BU
might
did
just be
wrong there?
one.
Because I because I was
BU,
an early supporter of BU, of
yes,
course.
yes. Well, as we know, there was a few issues when they were the main big block camp that everyone was rallying behind at the start, and there was some issues with like the software they released that introduced some bugs and stuff, and then
Well, I think it was XT, then Classic, and then BU in terms of the progression, if I remember correctly.
right.
If you know what I mean, in terms of what the kind of shelling points that people were rallying around at the time.
Hmm. Anyway, it's kind of unfortunate how things went there, but yeah, try to move on. But in your case, what are you now looking at, like as an investor? What
Yeah,
projects are interesting you now since you've moved on from that,
yeah.
other than
Let's move
Ethereum?
on from that. Let's move on from that ancient history. I think is probably a good idea. But no, it's nice just to chat with you a little bit on that and reflect. And I think part of what I'm looking for, and part of I think my investment thesis now is become a big believer in on-chain governance as a way to avoid the kind of problems we saw in Bitcoin, and I think in Ethereum even today, and in a host of different cryptocurrencies. I think that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and we need systems of on-chain governance to mitigate that sort of corruption that occurs. through the separation of powers, through checks and balances. Much like we would think about it as a government, but in this case, it's governance because it's within the context of a decentralized system.
Yeah, that would certainly be helpful and prevent a lot of issues. And yeah, I think to an extent, I'm not saying on any particular cryptocurrency, but there does seem to be a lot of corruption and like greediness going around just this whole space. And so if you remove the ability for people to be tempted in that way, or they can't do some actions that are in their own self-interest but negatively affect everyone else, that is welcome in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, and I think these systems are actually too easy to capture, so to speak. Like that decentralization still has a center, and it's possible to really capture, especially at a smaller scale, these systems. So I think very much as a lesson of what I think we've seen in cryptocurrency, that's one of the features I look for.
And so
As well as,
where is the area that, in your opinion, people can capture a cryptocurrency through? Like we saw on Bitcoin, obviously it happened through the development, but is it the same in other assets as well?
I think so. I mean, there's different degrees of capture, right? But in the case of, I think with the lack of decentralized governance, it's some sort of capture of the development by outside forces. And I think this is something we've seen happen multiple times. And this is something that concerns me when these kind of conflicts of interest arise. I think one of the ways to create, say, a counter to that force is to create a more L1 or, blockchain biased source of funding. And I think we can actually do that through self-funding mechanisms as well. But I think having the decentralized mechanisms in place, I think, is critically important. But it's like this bit of a chicken and egg problem, if you know what I mean. Because in my view, I don't actually think decentralized governance even functions correctly until we're at like a massive scale.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like until we reach that point, it's like we need we need to rely upon leaders in certain positions before you actually get a functional balance of power that actually creates this kind of collective decision making that we're looking for ultimately. And I think that's kind of the challenge, and that's where you still need to look a lot at individuals and to go back to our conversation. I think that's also where BCH and its resulting forks also failed as well. Is that internal leadership? There was a lot of infighting and bad decisions, let's say.
Yeah. So you say that we need some kind of internal funding mechanism as well. So in Bitcoin Cash, we saw that was one of the problems that people had a fight over, and obviously the one camp was in favor of funding through like donations, and the other one wanted to implement a policy where a percentage of the block reward would go to development and other infrastructure. So are you saying you're in favor of the latter one that I just mentioned?
No, because at the time I was writing about it against it, because in my view, if you create a fixed, the devil was in the details there, because there was a fixed address that was going to the developers that controlled it, basically.
Right.
So there was no decentralized mechanism to determine. And for that reason, I oppose, and that's the time when I got out of BCH, because I thought that was a ridiculous proposal, and it was really a sign of things being pretty rotten at the core. And before that, I was also a critic of Zcash when they implemented a similar design as well. Like what I'm thinking of is more in line of something like Tezos, Dash, and Decreed, where they have this decentralized voting mechanism, this DAO type structure,
Right. So
that determines where the funds end up going.
Yeah,
That's,
so
in my view, completely different.
Is that the holders of the coin who are voting on this? Or
Yeah, the stakeholders. So this, and that's part of where I'm at it today as well, as I'm really looking more exclusively at proof of stake. I'm not a big believer in proof of work anymore, just because I think it's inefficient and it's less secure and less economically sound. I could get into a bunch of different reasons, but for the vast majority of points, I think it's an inferior consensus mechanism, basically, at this stage. So that's with the stakeholders, naturally. I mean, if I were looking at a proof of work system, I would say, well, the miners would decide, but I just don't have confidence in their decision making either, because of the lack of long-term incentives.
Well,
go ahead.
We've seen that, in my opinion, on Bitcoin, the miners really failed to, take control, lead the community in the right direction with what happened on Bitcoin, and they allowed that to be captured. So that kind of failed, even though they held all the cards, you could say. They were in full control, and they kind of allowed bad things to happen.
Yeah, and I think I identified one of the main things, at least, because a lot of miners are very mercenary in their approach, and they usually have a timeline of about 3 to 5 years max, because of electricity contracts, because of hardware costs. So I think a lot of miners, when it comes to decision making, their incentives are actually leaning towards short-term decision making over long-term decision making. So I think in that sense, when they're faced with a choice of don't rock the boat now but face long-term negative consequences, they're likely to vote for don't rock the boat now. And I think that's a major problem. And I think in proof of stake, we can solve that by governance design that allows very long lock-in periods for your stake. And I think that's one of the ways that through proof of stake we can solve that problem.
Yeah, well, we've seen that Ethereum activated their proof of stake consensus mechanism in the last year. Things seem to have been going well so far. But I saw in the last week they were saying that they wanted to potentially increase the amount of Ethereum. So to create an Ethereum validator, you need 32 Ethereum. And they were basically saying that they want to allow a single validator to have way more than 32 Ethereum, over 2,000, I think 2,048 Ethereum maximum now. And this is something that, on the surface, just me looking at that, I feel like this could potentially hurt the decentralization that they previously advocated for. So do you feel the same way? Do you think it's like a bait and switch in some regard? Because this was one of the main promotional points of proof of stake. Like, everyone can run a node, and it's going to be more decentralized. But then if there's going to be these certain entities that are just like these huge validators, and there's less validators on the network, is that going to be an issue?
Mm-hmm. So I do have some strong criticisms of Ethereum, which relate to their rejection of off-chain governance, and also on-chain governance, and also their path of scaling. And I can maybe touch on that.
Yes,
later.
I wanted to
what
go
you're
to
referring
that soon, but yes.
Yeah. Well, what you're referring to specifically, I actually supported that proposal, and the reason why I supported that proposal is I think there were a lot of misleading headlines about what it meant, and it's not increasing the minimum. So you can still create a node with 32F. It's only affecting the maximum that you can stake. So
right.
So if we look at this at like a comparative basis, this is an interesting little side. But if we look at this in like a comparative basis, is it better if we have a single entity running 64 nodes, or a single entity that runs one node? From a decentralization perspective and from a network efficiency and security perspective, what's better? And I would actually argue a single entity running that one node is actually better, because then we can better estimate the true decentralization of the network, and it actually makes the P2P communication more efficient, so that you can have more nodes in total. It actually raises the limit on the number of nodes you can have before it becomes very demanding in terms of the bandwidth required. So for that reason, I came out in support of that proposal, but I felt like a lot of people misunderstood what that was really about.
Yeah. And yeah, I can certainly see how it's going to be easier for those guys who are currently running multiple validators because um, they've got a bunch of ETH and they currently need to do that. But you don't see any downsides with this at all?
No, no. I mean, look at it this way as well. If you're making the system more efficient, right? It's not creating any sort of unfairness within the system. Like you still get a proportional interest back, no matter if you're a big player or a small player, right? But what it does do is it creates more efficiency for the bigger players. Admittedly, well, that's arguable, maybe, but what that does is that lowers the cost, right, of operating this network. And I think in crypto economics, whenever you can lower costs, that means you can either improve security, or you can also improve the economic aspects, in decreasing scarcity, for instance. So I think in this way, I think it's an overall positive, and less reliance upon third parties as well. Like if for instance, in my example with the fund that I run, right, am I going to spin up 64 separate nodes and maintain all of those nodes when that's not what my firm specializes in? Or are we going to get some sort of outside expert, right? It might be more likely that we want to spin up our own node if it just takes one, right? So that decreases the reliance as well on third parties. So there's this was a particularly interesting case because I found that a lot of people misunderstood it. And admittedly, there were some really misleading headlines out there. Like when I first saw this, I was like, oh, wow, this is terrible because this means that it takes more to run a node. And I actually read the proposal. And it's one of the first things that it says up there. Yeah, it was just people love to go after stuff. And yeah, I mean, I've been pretty vocal about some of the downsides of Ethereum recently, actually, though, because I'm still a big blocker at heart, and I'm not particularly happy with the scalability pivot that Ethereum has made. So
yeah, let's get into that. Basically, it looks like they're going down the same path as Bitcoin did, and instead of pursuing the scaling on chain, they're now looking at all these different layer 2 side chains. So what is going on? Can you explain to everyone what is going on here? Because I think
it sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it?
Yes, but the issue for me is the original, like the Ethereum roadmap says that they were going to do sharding and all this stuff to like bring the fees down and scale. And
that's
I
been
think
cancelled.
Last year,
quietly cancelled.
Yeah, Vitalik last year was saying that people are going to use Ethereum to buy and sell, and we're going to make it about peer-to-peer transactions again. He said something to that effect. So what's going on? Is this not happening anymore?
Yeah. So I mean, it's tragic, and it's very familiar, I think, for the both of us, what's happening in Ethereum. I really think this is a case of history repeating itself. Yes, and the original plan included 64 shards, and then theoretically being able to scale up to 1,000 shards, which in my view is really the best solution to the blockchain scaling trilemma that I've seen. Blockchains such as Bitcoin without Turing completeness don't need sharding, in my view, because they don't require that extra complexity. But in my view, I think layer 1 scaling is absolutely critical. And what we've seen in Ethereum is is really a pivot, where they were promising layer 1 scalability, and they've pivoted over to layer 2s, really having for-profit companies, having layer 2s that have tokens and all these different things. And in my view, I think what this does, because of the diversity of choice that a free market creates, I think it's a UX nightmare.
It adds an incredible amount of complexity. That's even the issue for me. Like, I'm probably considered like an expert in crypto, and so are you. But when I'm trying to use this stuff, it just seems totally unnecessary, and it's like, why am I being forced to do this?
Yeah. And I might agree with the Ethereum developers if it really was not possible to scale the layer 1 any further, but I don't believe that's the case. So this is where I'm viewing things as being have really taken a big downturn, actually, in my view of Ethereum, because I've been a diehard supporter of Ethereum since the day it was launched. Even when we were both, in the BCH community together, I think I was also, one of the few there that I was very big on Ethereum, right? And I was very outspoken about that. And that's because I saw Ethereum as very much like part of that, offering more scalability, offering more capacity over Bitcoin, over really the failure of BTC. And I think the market did route around BTC, and it went to Ethereum, and it went to a lot of different chains, right? So in that sense, we're on the right side of history. But I mean, the similarities are uncanny. I mean, the fact that something like Arbitrum has bought out a client called Prism, like literally buying out major clients. The fact that the majority of the L1 developers that were there to really scale the blockchain are now all working for layer 2 companies, making a lot of them making a lot of money from those tokens. And look at the market today, right? The largest layer 2 is Arbitrum, right? Which has a admin key that's tied to its smart contract, which means that, if the people that control that admin key decide, they can steal all of the user funds.
That's not good. That's not
no,
what cryptocurrency stands for either. This is like
absolutely terrible. And furthermore, there's something called a sequencer, and the sequencer is able to censor any transactions it wants, basically.
Yeah. So this is going back now to the systems of old that we're trying to get away from.
But in many ways it is. And then optimism is the same, right? It also has a centralized sequencer, and it also has an admin key. This is what people are being pushed into using, and they say that they're going to fix this and fix that, and I've been deep in the weeds and learning about layer 2 scaling versus sharding, and I think they're very wrong on this one. And I think that due to the complexity of it, I think it's going to drive a lot of users away, or drive a lot of users into custodians.
Yes.
And in the longer run, I think block space is incredibly valuable, and the chain that will be able to offer, the most block space with the best UX, with the most security will, outcompete anything like that, because it just doesn't make sense from, any real perspective that I can see. Seeing that sort of fragmentation of liquidity, of composability, and that's a tragedy. And it's deja vu in terms of the arguments now being used to support it. Like, Ethereum is a settlement layer, right? It's just this ultra secure store of value that you can run off your mobile, you can run off your phone, or your Raspberry Pi, and super secure, and everything's just going to go on layer 2s. Yes. Right, that's the narrative right now, and it happens slowly. There was no big announcement, we're dropping sharding now. That just didn't happen. There was no block size debates in Ethereum, no vocal one at least.
Are you saying that this is completely gone from the roadmap now, and that they've admitted they no longer want to pursue this? Do you know what Vitalik's position on this is? Isn't he meant to be the main guy that's leading things that everyone is following? Is he no longer on board with that either?
He's no longer on board with scaling the L1. I should add a caveat to this though, because there is, the ZKM EVM. That's something they are pursuing, which technically can be used for on-chain scaling. But just to answer your question, they basically dropped sharding, or specifically execution sharding, from the roadmap, and that's something that was very bothersome when that happened, I think about 6 months ago. And that's something they did very quietly.
Yeah.
They still have something called dank sharding on the roadmap, but that's only for data availability. That's only to benefit the layer 2s, so to speak, which reminds me quite a bit of the role SegWit played during the history of Bitcoin, actually.
Right.
That enabled layer 2s.
Clearly a lot of similarities here, and the end result is the same. where it's introducing censorship of transactions and also trusting custodians with the funds. But looking back at how things have gone with BTC, even though they went down this path, like the price has still gone up a lot. And so they haven't really suffered any consequences as a result of these policy decisions. And, the same may very well happen with Ethereum. So what kind of, is there anything that can deter these guys from going down this path if they've already seen that this is something other people have done and they haven't really had any consequences for that?
Yeah. I would still like to talk about the ZK EVM, but I can loop back to that later just because I want to be fair on the Ethereum developers here. I think it's an important part of the picture. But your question is what can we do about this to deter developers? And that's where I would say come back. We need systems of governance, so that what effectively happens is you've got a small cadre of individuals who are able to effectively control the direction or the decision making of a blockchain, and I think that's what's effectively happened here, whether it be because of misaligned incentive or whether some of these people really truly believe that and find that narrative more attractive. I think both are definitely occurring, and I just want to be completely fair on the ZK on the Ethereum developers, because in their view they're developing something known as the ZK EVM, which is basically using zero knowledge proofs for everything that the blockchain does, so that you're only storing the proofs and then you can later even you can remove those proofs at a later point as well. And that would allow for massive scalability. However, that to me, it is an extremely difficult challenge. And after talking to a lot of the Ethereum core developers, and I've been trying to find out, well, how long would this actually take? I've got it under very good authority that they're thinking about a timeline of 5+ years. And in my view, if a software engineer tells me 5+ years, I'm running away, because it might as well not exist.
Yeah, and it's probably never going to happen at that point. There could be just like a stalling sort of tactic, as we've seen with again, on BTC. This is exactly the same thing that happened.
And it's this idea of and for the engineers that are sincere on developing this, and I do believe some of the guys I talk to at least are sincere about this. I think this is a classic case of the Nirvana fallacy, or engineers are over engineering, basically trying to create this immensely complex and perfect thing, but that's not really the practical thing right now for the market. And also considering that a ZK EVM would obsolete all of these layer 2s that are supposed to be our capacity for the next 2 years. The incentives for that just don't line up. It's misaligned. That's where I think scale the layer 1 first, I think is so important for these blockchains. And if you go down this path, I mean, the repeat of history here is poignant, right? That's why I'm having such a strong focus on governance, because I really am looking at this idea of governance as a way of avoiding this bad decision making again and again. That the same thing is occurring is pretty frightening.
And as you say, if they did focus on the scaling on layer 1, then all the layer 2 stuff is obsoleted. But considering that was...
Well, it's not completely obsoleted, to be fair.
Right.
But
to some extent.
In terms of the scale they're thinking of it now, yeah.
And they seem to be, given that layer 1 scaling was the original path forward, they seem to be investing a lot in this layer 2 stuff, and this is where a lot of the focus has shifted now. So yeah, that's quite telling that the intention, what the intentions are here, is that they want to pursue the layer 2 stuff and not look at layer 1 at all anymore.
Oh yeah, I just want to be really clear that, so basically we can't expect any major layer 1 capacity increases for the next 5 years. And that change in 5 years is dependent upon a highly experimental, highly controversial technology So I think that's unlikely, and that's something I wouldn't bet on. And that to me is a very, very long timeline. I'm at least happy they didn't say 18 months, because that just would have been too much.
Yeah. And so, well, you've said that the governance thing needs to be solved. Currently, what is the governance system in Ethereum? Is it basically the small group of people making all the decisions? So what is the point then of the decentralization of all the validators and nodes? Shouldn't they implement some sort of system where, say, validators can vote on the direction of things?
That's the position that I support. I think stakeholders should be part of a voting system that decides where things goes, instead of what it is now. And in the case of Ethereum and in the case of Bitcoin, I think they're mostly honest about this, even though it's dressed in very flowery language, which, it is important to lift the veil a bit on that. But it's this idea, it's a meritocracy, and it's science, and we are all, the best people will agree what the best path forward is, and we do this as a community and consensus. That's this narrative, right? We all come onto these forums, we do proposals, the best ones wins, and that's the idea that's promoted within BTC and Ethereum, right? I think the reality is that it's, effectively, well, in the case of Bitcoin, I would say it's effectively a type of dictatorship. We have a single client implementation that ends up being able to call, all of the shots, within limits. Like, even dictators have limits to their power, right? In Ethereum, actually, it's a bit better in Ethereum, because they saw what happened to BTC and like, okay, we need multiple client implementations. So there's these multiple client implementations, and they all come to an agreement about, what the next decision is. But what we're talking about here is a cabal of developers, technocrats, if you will.
Yes.
So that's a type of technocratic system. And I think the reality, I think this idea of a technocracy, I think it's utopian, because I think the reality of science and a lot of the scientific process, there's a lot of politics that happens there. So I think what we often see happening in a lot of scientific fields is that politics end up influencing the outcomes of things. We see this in the pharmaceutical industry, for instance. We see this in a range of different industries. We see how this is able to occur.
A lot of these guys, they will only get, in the other industries you mentioned, they will only get funding to do what they're doing if they go and support a certain narrative. So this is also potentially what's happening over here too. They're getting funding through, say, their tokens, their layer 2 tokens, because they're supporting the layer 2 roadmap or agenda there, and the layer 1 stuff is being discarded as a result. But also, do you think, in the other industries, there's a whole lot of corruption going on there too? So would you say in Ethereum, with the layer 2 stuff, is there corruption there?
So I have called it corruption before. I think it's what we call a misalignment of incentive. And I think at any sufficient scale that causes corruption. And with corruption here, I mean, is going against what's best for Ethereum. That's
like pursuing your self-interest in a way. Yeah,
at the cost of Ethereum in this case, which is what a lot of these organizations should be upholding. And I think we saw the same thing happening in Bitcoin. And I think, in Bitcoin, you had Blockstream and Chaincode Labs, and in Ethereum, you have Arbitrum and Optimism. And I don't think they play that different of a role in terms of perverting the developmental path. And I think we can draw lessons from that and design blockchains that resist that sort of corruption.
Yeah. And we saw in Bitcoin, we saw when there was debate happening, but the Blockstream side and small block side was also actively trying to stop debate from happening. and there was a lot of censorship going on Reddit and other forums. Is it at that point yet on Ethereum with what's happening now, or are we before that part? Do you think it will happen?
So we're before that part in terms of any censorship occurring.
Right. So
I have seen
allowing debate.
toxicity pop up a bit. Sorry.
They're still allowing debate right now, at least.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and they're not completely shutting off. And I would say like the majority of the Ethereum community is actually quite open-minded and civil. And in that sense, a lot of my critiques have been received on average pretty positively. There have been a few people that, ended up getting pretty toxic and doing vitriol and ad hominem. And for some of those, it was a bit sad because I actually looked up to some of those guys that turned. But I think for the most part, there is room for discussion and there is room for debate. And in that sense, I'm not done fighting yet when it comes to, moving Ethereum in terms of, where I think it would be better for people. Considering its dominant position, I think, having the biggest cryptocurrency fail and then having the second biggest cryptocurrency fail is not good for this movement, So
No.
I would rather that we can still salvage, Ethereum, in my view. I think that's better for the world, and I think that's better for humanity. So, and I think there is room for that still. I think there's still room for discussion. And that's part of the reason I've been more vocal on this subject, because I want to, to do what's best for this movement, obviously, and I want bigger blocks for Ethereum, so to speak.
Yeah, and definitely if you can still speak and have debate, I would say now's the time to do it and like double down and get it done while you still can. As well, another thought I had is since we see so many correlations with what happened on BTC and what's happening here now on Ethereum, on BTC there has been a lot of research done, and we've seen that basically it seems that the development has been corrupted by groups that have links to the legacy financial system and who see Bitcoin as potentially obviously it's a massive threat to their control over the monetary system of the world. And so obviously it seems they have funded individuals and companies and groups to subvert the original goals of Bitcoin. Once Bitcoin started getting too big, they did that. And as a result of that happening on Bitcoin, a lot of the money and people working on that or involved in that went to Ethereum, and now Ethereum has become really big. And do you think it's potentially the same sort of groups behind all this subversion? So they started with BTC and now Ethereum got too big. Now, do you think they're moving to Ethereum? And they're like, hey, the same like strategies that we employed, we're going to use the same strategies we employed at BTC because it works so well. Maybe that's why we're seeing the same thing happen again.
Maybe. I can't prove it. I think in the case of BTC, you could definitely see the lines of money there. I haven't looked into Arbitrum and Optimism. I don't think that's necessarily the case there, or some of these other layer twos. I mean, maybe some of the money comes from those sources, but you wouldn't even need to inject the money into the ecosystem. I mean, if some agents had the experience of subverting BTC, then they could do the same with ETH with a much smaller budget, I bet. It was interesting, actually. There was a CIA commission paper that I read. I think it was released like a year ago. It's in my Twitter feed, and in it actually talks about how to attack a system like Bitcoin. And they said that the cheapest and most effective way to attack a system like Bitcoin is to buy out the developers within that, or to subvert them, so to speak. So I thought that was just fascinating when I read that, because obviously it does follow that MO. But the way I like to operate
when was that published? Do you know
I
when
think
that was
it was about a year ago, if I remember
right?
correctly. Yeah, yeah, I have it on my feed, which is really fascinating. I think
Right.
you'd also
If
find it
it came
interesting.
before what happened, that would be pretty interesting. But
That would be even better. Yeah,
maybe they just saw what happened and they're going off that. But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. That's quite possible as well. I I prefer to focus on what we can know because that's usually already compelling enough. So, but it's fun to speculate because I mean we've seen intelligent agencies do that to movements in the past, and a lot of that is declassified now. How they've been able to subvert revolutionary movements from within. So who knows? Maybe in 80 years some of this stuff will get declassified and we would know. But yeah, it's fascinating to think about.
Mm. Well, in order to hopefully get things back on track, what do you think the best course of action is now? So you say we need more decentralization and governance. How can a system that is decentralized governance get implemented, something that's better than what is currently there?
I think we have a lot of options, and I tend to be very critical in the space, but at the same time I'm also an optimist, and I believe in technology being able to solve problems, and in that sense we actually we do have constant progress, even though in some of these bigger blockchains we see a lot of flaws pop up, and well, actually we see flaws pop up everywhere in the smaller blockchains as well too. Nothing is perfect here, but I do think I have a sense of constant progress over the last decade that I've been involved in cryptocurrency, and seeing systems of sharding that are being deployed today that's capable of hundreds of thousands of TPS, and even theoretically millions in the future. Having blockchains that have implemented the type of on-chain governance that I'm talking about for many years. Blockchains like Dash and Decreed and Tezos have been, running these type of systems live for a long time. There's a lot of newer blockchains that are also implementing these kind of systems. So I think ultimately, when Bitcoin was unleashed on the world, let's say, it started a process. It started a process in the free market. I like to sometimes compare it to a kind of almost like an evolution. That we have speciation and we have competition between all of these different cryptocurrencies, and it ends up telling a story. The story of the evolution of cryptocurrency, which is which involves people fighting each other. It involves different actors. It involves colorful personalities, and I think we can sit back and enjoy the journey a little bit as well and fight the good fight. But I think ultimately this is a free market system, and I think in that sense, if Ethereum doesn't get its act together, and yes, I would say advocate for on-chain governance, advocate for funding sharding, support clients that can compete with the Ethereum Foundation's clients, going down that road. But at the same time, we can also vote with our feet. We can support cryptocurrencies that do have the features that we believe are going to set humanity free, and bring the promises that Satoshi, I think, envisioned when he unleashed Bitcoin on the world.
So from our past experience, I have a feeling that that may not always be the solution that will work, so to speak. But yeah, if you had to choose
How
another,
so?
oh well, we've already tried that once before with the BCH, for example, and
Okay.
at this point, I would say that while it like works as intended, it has been a failure in that no one has in the wider cryptocurrency community really given it much attention, and no one's really interested in that. Um, so
Right,
how
but
would you
but
solve
but we
that?
have a system with bigger blocks. That's progress, right? We have Ethereum, which has Turing complete smart contracts. That's progress, right? We have systems like Tezos that have the on-chain governance. That's also progress. Looking at the ecosystem as a whole, we can see how we're marching forward in terms of the fundamentals. Yes, it's frustrating that Bitcoin is still at number one. Like, I get that. I've been shouting that off the rooftops forever. And, on the one hand, it's terrible. On the other hand, I guess we can factor in that blockchain network effects can be extremely sticky. So that's interesting in itself. That's not necessarily a negative. It just means we need to go through several more iterations before we get the right, type of designs that become more dominant. That is maybe the bird's eye view, and if we, get that third perspective going, that's maybe how we can feel good about where we are today as well.
So do you think maybe in the long run, in the future, there may be some new asset that is, taking the good aspects of multiple things that exist today and combining all that, and that may be something that succeeds? Or do you think there's a higher
Absolutely.
chance that something that already
So,
exists right now will succeed?
well, it could be, something new that comes along. It could be something that exists today that evolves into a more perfect form, or a more ideal form, I should say. It's probably going to be a combination of both. Blockchains can evolve their design. And, I have a bit of a checklist of sorts where I'm like, okay, on-chain governance, check; proof of stake, check; sharding, execution sharding, check, right? I can go off proof of stake, check, right? And, no blockchain ticks off all the boxes, but a lot get close and are planning to fill the gap. So for me, that's great. There's a future there. That's what gets me excited. That we still have that progress, that constant marching forward, and I can take a detached look of it as well as a personal view on it. Like, I'm able to have both perspectives, and the one informs the other.
And one thing I've been considering recently is the potential that BTC, for example, may change their current course and finally increase the block size to allow more on-chain scaling. And I've seen recently like a re-emergence of people in that coin, given it's still like the top coin, it's attracted new people over the years, and many of these ones are now kind of getting to the point where they're like, hey, we want to like scale better on chain, and this kind of debate seems to be re-emerging there again right now with the ordinals, and that has really been the driving force behind this movement currently. I would say the ordinals, NFTs. So that could be something interesting that we may see happen, and yeah, the prospect of that happening kind of makes me feel excited in a way, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, the possibility exists. I have been watching what's been happening here, and I actually think it's more likely that we'll see an inflation increase in Bitcoin than we would see a block size increase in Bitcoin actually at this stage. And for me, it's a lot about measuring the governance and the politics of the system as well, and knowing that a lot of the same people are still in charge, and knowing of what they'll have to overcome in order to really make that happen and not end up as a minority split of that blockchain. Yeah, I'm not optimistic that we'll see a block size increase within 5 years, within 10 years even. And I think when it does come, which it probably will eventually, as Bitcoin faces, the wall of its security model, with the inflation, gradually running out, that will cause a split, and hopefully it won't be as prominent as it is today if all of that stuff starts going wrong. I have talked to. Oh, sorry. I have talked to some people. I have talked to some people which, do advocate for an inflation increase. Peter Todd, for example, and a few more. And yeah, I think a lot of them would rather watch the network burn and die on that hill. And I think if you increase it much later on, then it's going to be too late in terms of gaining sufficient usage to pay for long-term security. So that's the dilemma that Bitcoin faces. And I think the problem with the governance as well of these systems, and this goes for Ethereum and Bitcoin, it's something that we've called before as Nakamoto consensus, right? The idea is that if you don't agree, then fork off and create your own chain, right? Like that's the decision-making process. You got the dictator that says, my way or the highway, and if you don't like it, go create your own country. But we'll fight you over it. Right? So that to me, yeah. So what that does is it creates an extremely high barrier of change. And I think that the difficulty of overcoming that is too high. And I think that's where we need the type of mediation process in terms of on-chain governance to say, let's have a voting process. And even though you might not have agreed with, the result of the vote, you might still agree with the process of coming to that decision. Right? This is why democracies don't have civil wars after every time, there's an election, right? Because you have some sort of decision-making process. So I think the big problem with Bitcoin is that that's how governance is done. You have a dictator that says my way or the highway, or go create your own country, right? And then that's an attack on Bitcoin, right? And I think the opposition that would have to build, and I do admire some of the work that Eric Wall and Udi are doing in terms of throwing a bit of a spanner, into that narrative. I appreciate the humor but also the satire of it, I suppose. But I don't think it will be enough to overcome the incumbents, the people that are in charge. And yeah, I've been watching closely as well when people had these discussions about block sizes, and I'm like, wow, okay, interesting. And then you have the old guard coming in saying, no way.
Yeah. Well, even if they're not successful in that, my thoughts are that at least they could draw a lot of attention to the fact that the governance in BTC is not very good. And, maybe this time it may have some greater effect on BTC's dominance, and people might go look for alternatives again. I don't know. But it's certainly getting a lot of attention.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange one, right? Because for me, as a fundamental researcher, when I look at Bitcoin, I'm like, okay, it has highly centralized governance. It has it's dysfunctional centralized governance, might I add. It's not scalable. It has a long-term security model that's flawed, right? And I look at this and I'm like, how come all these people are praising it, right? You have big articles about it. You got these supposedly very smart people saying it's the best thing since sliced bread, right? It's the most decentralized network. It's the next money, even though it's literally incapable of serving the world as money. Like it's technically incapable of that, right? If every person in the world just wants to do one transaction, it would take 70 years. Like that, it just doesn't work, right? So how come you have this kind of mass stupidity, if you will, in the world?
I think that's exactly what it is, because I've seen as well, like the same sort of thing. And what some of these people promoting it seem to be promoting the same kind of narratives that surrounded Bitcoin in the earlier days before it was corrupted and crippled. And so that says to me that these guys maybe they're getting their information from some earlier source material, but they don't fully understand what they're delving into, or that they don't understand the technology and the current state of it. And this is why they're just kind of mindlessly repeating something that they've heard that is no longer true.
Yeah, it's mind blowing, isn't it? But something I've come to realize over time, because I'm a specialist in cryptocurrency, so the flaws are more noticeable, I think. Whenever you're an expert in something, I think at least a critical one, then the flaws become much more glaring, if you will. And I think the reality is that it's not that different from the rest of the world. There's a lot of stupid things going on, and the world's always been, chaotic and pretty ridiculous at times. And I think in that sense, that's why I believe we can apply a lot of the lessons of old to cryptocurrency when it comes to governance, if I tie it back to that, because it's just these aspects of human nature, and we see that repeating itself, throughout human societies. And cryptocurrency is no stranger to that, I think, as well. And I think it's a bit naive to think that, we have this decentralized network now, and hey, but these developers will be in charge of decisions, but they'll just be fine. Don't worry about it. That's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
No, I think that's one of the big unresolved problems, and I think we have answers to it, and I think we can learn from the past and build better systems. But that's a lot of what motivates me, is like I'm just trying to shake people up and trying to like wake up from this dream. Can't you see the reality, the kind of matrix around us? This is supposed to set us free from that, or help at least in setting us free from that type of mental enslavement, if you will. And then the thing that's supposed to set us free ends up being our cage. It just ends up being another cage, ends up just perverting what it was originally stood for. That to me is just tragic. But ultimately, one of the reasons I came into cryptocurrency is because I believe in incentive systems. So I think a well-designed incentive system, I don't need people to be enlightened in order for the system to work towards the public good. And that's where I look at the free market to really sort the wheat from the chaff over the longer run. But this really is going to be a long run. It's going to be a marathon, and we're still very early in the race.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with all that. And I think a lot of it comes down to, a lot of the problems come down to just like human behavior. And that's why you see the same sort of thing going on in crypto as you do like in the outside world, in politics and that sort of thing. It's the same sort of thing in each realm, so to speak.
Yeah.
And
and that's why like a lot of developers, they're not well equipped for it. Like they're good with numbers, they're good with these sort of thing, but politics, and governance, we need experts in that as well, to kind of make things work. And I think this is why you end up with a lot of these developer groups, having this naive idea of, no, the GitHub governs the blockchain. And this will be perfectly fine. They make themselves vulnerable, I think, to outside influences, and also, some of them just go a bit mad with the power, as we've seen that as well happen. And there's a few outcomes, and none of them are really good, unfortunately.
Oh well, I hope that some progress can be made on the governance sort of issues, but we're coming up on about an hour in the interview, so maybe we can wrap things up. Did you have any final thoughts that you wish to impart to the audience before we end it all?
Sure. Yeah, I think as a final word, I think I really want to put out there that I don't want people to get discouraged. There's a reason why I've dedicated the last 10 years of my life to cryptocurrency. It's because I actually believe in this movement. I believe in the power of this technology. Even though, it's been ruined by human nature and corruption time and time again. We've seen all of these problems come, and the scammers come and go, and the Wall Street types and all of this. Ultimately, I think at its core, cryptocurrency is really capable of helping to liberate more of humanity and making the world a more free place. And, I also believe in the power of the technology. It's like rejecting the wheel or rejecting fire or rejecting the internet. I think ultimately, at least with capitalism, I think that value accrues there. And, the future is bright. And I really just want to get that across, that there's a reason why I've dedicated my life to this movement, a lot of my life at least, and you know, and I think the problems can be overcome. Yeah. I think we have to be patient and we have to be wise, and but I think ultimately the market will sort the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah, I feel the same way. But yeah, thanks for coming on, Justin. It was great having you here, and love to have you again at some point in the future. Where can people find your website? Just let everyone know what that is.
Yeah, no, you can follow me on Twitter and Justin_bonds, and you can also check out my company's website, cyber.capital, and you can also take a look at my Medium page as well, where I also release a lot of articles and do a lot of writing on the subject. So yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you for having me on. Again, I really appreciate it. And,
yeah.
This is a fun discussion.
Well, to everyone watching, if you've made it this far, thanks for tuning in. Make sure to share this video and like it as well if you enjoyed hearing what Justin had to say, and hope to see you all again in the next one. See you later.